If you could go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
I would tell my 18-year-old self that it is a both-and universe. It is not an either-or universe. And physics demonstrated that. Physics was able to demonstrate that light is both a wave and a particle. And when I'm with students now, I really encourage them to embrace that ideal. As a first-generation student, there are some times when you're continuing your education that you almost feel like you're betraying where you came from. And so one of the only ways I was able to make it through was to remind myself consistently that it's a both-and universe.
I would say reading as much as you can. Mm-hmm. I always enjoyed reading, but I don't think I read enough. I was used to just reading what was necessary in high school, and it was pretty easy for me. And then when I got to college, all of a sudden they were covering a lot more material, and the students who read more than what was required or extra things that were required, then they just knew so much more about the subject.
Bill, how about you? What's your advice?
My advice is, and this I wish I had told myself when I was 18, but now I can tell somebody else, stay focused, and because it was suggested that I might leave for a while and then come back when I thought I might want to be a student. So then when I left, and then I did come back, and I had to see the dean to explain, yes, I'm ready now, sir. And then I didn't look from side to side. I knew where I was going, and I channeled in and off I went. But I wish that I had not lost that year that he suggested I take, and then maybe figure out some things, and then come back and say. So that would be my advice.
My parents had the expectation that I would go to college, and sometimes I thought I should get through with degrees sooner than later. Life gets in the way. I did finish a master's degree, and I just finished my EDD. And sometimes we think that waiting is wasted, and looking back, I wouldn't view it as wasted time. It's life. And that's what I would tell my younger self.
You know, this might not be the best thing to say, but honestly, I think it would be to loosen up and have a little more fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. I spent so many hours in a practice room this big by this big, and I had to. I mean, it was a dedication, and I'm so glad I did, but I would say get out of that practice room a little bit, experience a little more of college life is honestly probably what I would say.
So very simple, but there's a little bit of a story that I want to tell to kind of set it up. And so I was a geology major when I went to school at University of Oklahoma, and the price of oil plummeted, and decided late that I wanted to change my major. And so I would pick up a history or a political science class because I seemed to do well in it, and I really liked it. And so about my senior year, I changed my major. And
about your senior
I won't
year.
Say exactly when. Yeah, to the.
And your parents
my
said,
parents were furious.
Yeah,
my
right.
parents were so
Okay.
furious. But I had an upper division history course, and it was a Reformation era of England, and I'll never forget. You know, in these kinds of classes, there was usually just a midterm and a final, and so I got the midterm back, and. Oh gosh, I can't think. F. Gerald Goldsworthy, I think, was the name. Very austere, history, full professor at OU. And he wrote on my book that had a blue cover on the front. It said, "Mr. Campbell, you are far more capable than this drivel." Yes.
Nice.
Yes, and I didn't know what drivel meant.
I knew I had been. That up?
Yeah, I didn't know it. Yeah,
okay.
Dictionary.com didn't even
exist
in
it didn't
1984.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So I went in and I talked with him. And I just said, I don't know what this means. And he said, well, you participate in class. You seem to be, passionate about, Charlemagne or whatever it was that we were talking about. He said, but you don't seem to be able to translate what happens in class to the written word, and you have to be able to do that. And it was the first time someone really had given me the feedback, you need to be able to write. And it was at that point that I connected with him, and he basically gave me the feedback, the only way to improve your writing is to write. I mean, you just have to write, and you have to be open to feedback. And so it literally was the first faculty member that I went into their office, because when I was over in GN Sciences, you didn't have to do that.
You didn't have to write.
You didn't have to do it. You just have to look at the rock.
Right. Yep.
And so I would give the feedback to my 18-year-old self to make those connections earlier and more meaningful. And I would say that to our listeners too, that really is the biggest part, or one of the biggest components of the college experience. Get to know your faculty. Go in and ask them what drivel means. Hopefully you don't get that on your blue book. But go in there and talk to them. I mean, ask questions. I mean, if I would have done that, well, there's no telling, what direction. But I'm glad that I did that, because my last year experience was much, much better than my first 3 years. And it was largely because of that one faculty member.
Boy, I thought about this question, and I never could really come up with a perfect answer. I think what I would probably tell myself is just be sure and sample every opportunity that you have in your general education classes, because you may end up finding something that you like better than what you initially thought you were there for.
That is so true.
I had no intention of going into science. It did not even appeal to me in the slightest.
What did you want to do?
I actually thought I was going to either go into law enforcement or law and become a lawyer.
Wow.
That was really where I thought I was going to go.
Here you are.
And I took a couple of science classes, and I just fell in love with one of them, and I said, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
So find something that you just get up every morning and go, I can't wait to go do this.
It's probably what I'm still advising students, because I'm still teaching students and my own children, which was to get the broadest education you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Stick with it. Don't ever give up. It's never too late. All those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And to follow your dream.
That has been hard for me to think about, because, it's just a hard question. The main thing I think I wish that somebody had told me and convinced me of is that I had a right to be confident. Yeah. I was not self-confident. I may have appeared that way, but I really had a lot of doubts about my abilities, and that was something that I still have doubts about my abilities, but I also have a lot more confidence. So I wish I had known that I was smarter than I thought I was.
It would be to do the hard thing, to do the uncomfortable thing. I was such a liberal arts kid. School has always just been that thread for me throughout my entire life of comfort and my love. But I never pushed myself in terms of math and science and the kind of that kind of funky way that karma works in one's life, right? In my middle age, I'm so interested in horticulture and landscape and science and insects, and I'm interested in all this stuff. And maybe it's just the lack. Maybe it's just the filling the thing that never got filled.
Yeah.
But I love all of that stuff. If I could go back now, I would become a landscape architect or something. I say that now, but that's who I am now.
Yeah.
So I got sort of a slow start. It's taken me 4 years to get my associate's degree here at TCC, just because I couldn't go full-time every semester. But for the first 2 or 3 semesters, it sort of felt like I was just doing homework and only assignments and taking care of my GPA, and it's really, really important. But if I had known how valuable the extracurricular activities and the experiences outside the classroom were, I would have started a lot earlier. And I know that there were lots of opportunities that I passed up, even though I took advantage of a lot of them, the internship and the National Science Foundation competition, outreach, all kinds of stuff. But there were definitely things that could have helped me learn and grow and be even more prepared to get to a 4-year university. And that's what I would tell any student who's starting out is make sure that you don't overload yourself. Don't go full time if that's going to tax and it's going to take up all of your time, all your spare time. Maybe start out slow and leave yourself some breathing room to to take risks, to put yourself in places or organizations where you haven't done those types of things before, and practice public speaking.
Well, if I could go back and give myself advice at 18, it would be really around these things that I'm talking about today, and it would be an entrepreneurial venture. And what I mean by that is, instead of going out and buying a fancy car or that kind of thing, I would take the money and put it for a down payment for a revenue-producing asset, a rental property or a business or something like that, something that's going to allow me to make money as opposed to losing money.
We talked a little bit about this before the interview. I would just tell myself, you're going to have an awesome advisor. Listen to that advisor. She's going to help you through everything that you need to do to be successful. But other than that, I don't know, maybe this is being mean of me, but I wouldn't tell my 18-year-old self much at all, because I wouldn't want to change anything or adjust anything that would happen in the future.
Just let it organically go.
Yeah, organically go, because everything, I've had such wonderful things happen with my life and my career, and some bad things too, but all of that needed to happen.
You bet.
And so I don't think that I would give too much information, except for listen to your advisor, do what she says, and then just expect a wonderful life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have an interesting background. I grew up very rural Oklahoma. My freshman year, I was on a drama scholarship. My sophomore year, I went into social work. At the end of that sophomore year, I got married and moved to Texas, and in about 10 minutes had a counselor help me find secondary ed and biology.
Wow.
And so I would say to the 18-year-old self, put yourself where you can communicate with people, find mentors that will share their story with you. I run early in the morning, and I sometimes see a shooting star or a meteor. And that's the analogy, is that I wouldn't see that if I hadn't set myself out there. It's sometimes kind of scary to be out there in the dark, but lifting my eyes and looking around. So I would say, search every pathway, talk to every mentor that will share their story, and kind of put yourself out there on the edge a bit.
The advice I would give is to run with your curiosity. Don't be afraid.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Just let it run.
Yeah.
I think I spent too much time being afraid to show how curious I was at times. So.
That's good. That's good. Okay.
Doug, what about you?
Doug, what do you got?
I actually was study abroad. I traveled around the country in a band, marching band, when I was like 14 or 15, so the idea of being away from home wasn't frightening at all. And then we took a concert band from my high school over to Spain. And then I had this long hiatus of not traveling, and I've done a lot in the last 12 years of my role, but it's just like, why didn't I? But I would go back when I was going into my junior college or community college and say, sign up for study abroad, and start going. It's very transformational.
Yeah,
we have a lot of evidence for that, and so I'd study abroad.
I would tell my 18-year-old self to be bolder and to be less afraid.
Mm-hmm. That is good advice.
And I use that advice on my 50-year-old self as well, because
it's good advice all along the way.
It is. I look at students and I just, be bold, be fierce, and don't be afraid. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're not going to have it figured out, but just try new things. Don't be afraid to try something new. I think of that as, for students, I wanted to do study abroad, and I sort of looked into it, but then I got real scared and didn't do it.
Didn't follow through.
Right, and I think these can be life-changing experiences.
That's right.
And the younger you have them, the stronger you will be.
Okay, so my answer is going to be based on the context that I am completing my final assignment for my class that's due Wednesday, and it's 20 pages. So my message to my 18-year-old self would be, never let self-doubt stop you. Always move forward. So that means to me, I would not be a mother, a wife, a mother of 3 children and a wife pursuing my PhD at this time. If I would have I let the fear of the GRE and thinking,
Oh, you waited to go to graduate school. Go ahead and go.
Do it. Just go for
Just
it.
go to school.
Go
Stay
for
in
it.
school.
Continue
Yeah.
your education. Don't take a 15-year break and go back.
Okay.
Just do it.
I think what I would tell myself, I was very focused when I went to college. I knew what I thought. I knew what I wanted to do. And so I think I would tell myself, take a little bit more time to explore.
That's good advice. That's good advice. Aaliyah, what about you?
Be confident, don't be scared. Don't doubt yourself.
You can do it. You belong here at the college. I'm a Mizzou alum. You can do this. Ask questions and do the work. There are no shortcuts.
This one's really easy for me, and I guess I would even change it, which you would always say, don't ever change anything, but I really wish I would have been more involved in community service when I was younger. And I did a lot in my high school years, but in college, first generation, I just didn't have time. I didn't cut out time for that. 2 to 3 jobs, college, and then the next thing I know, I'm in, in this, and I look back and go, oh, I missed so many years of really doing community service. And so my younger self, I'd say, cut that time out. It's just like workout time. It's so important. It reminds us why we're doing what we're doing. So that would probably be my number one thing. I wish that I would have really focused a little bit more time on that.
Wow. If we only knew what we know now when we're 18, right?
That's the whole point of
the whole point is
yeah.
We know nothing when we're 18. Well, I would say what I was saying earlier is just to say yes and to not let fears and challenges hold you back. To follow your passions, follow your gut, follow what interests you, and be curious about life and talk with other people. I was very shy as an 18-year-old, believe it or not.
Interesting.
And I would have just wished I could go back and tell myself, don't worry, just talk to other people and learn from them.
That's great.
It's taken me 30 years to 40 years.
That's all right.
Years to learn that.
That's a great question. I love that question. I think set goals. Set goals and be persistent with your goals. Have a dream. Have several dreams. And it may not always be exactly how you dreamed it, but you can certainly make a great, rewarding life. I think just being persistent and setting goals, that's the way to make it. So.
I would say maybe a couple things that came to mind is one, get a mentor. I was able to get a mentor when I was in my graduate degree program, but I'd say if I could back that up several years, matter of fact, I still, many decades later, still connect weekly with my mentor, and he motivates me, encourages me, challenges me. So I think that's one thing is, I didn't think of that when I was 18. I thought of it when I was in my 20s, but to do that, and then probably write I go around the country talking about, everyone should have a personal why statement. Why are you doing what you're doing? Like a mission statement for yourself personally, but make that bigger than yourself. So, that gets to the point where you can think about the impact you're having beyond just a job, if you will. What impact can you have by doing what you're doing? And
I love that.
So I think that's one of the things I would encourage myself to do when I was 18 is what's your why statement? And, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and we're making all this money, but their why statement, they have pictures, and I do too as well. Some of our offenders, I have pictures I'm putting up in my office at graduation, and this is why I do it, is because, we're helping transform lives. So that's what motivates you. I always talk to salespeople. That'll motivate you to make that extra call when you're tired and things like that. So I think those things would be what I tell myself when I was 18.
First thing that I think of, and probably would have saved me a lot and my 18-year-old self, is to learn to trust myself and to trust what I'm interested in doing. I changed majors I don't know how many times in college. Yes, I changed my major several times because I put a lot of pressure on myself to know everything I was going to do for the rest of my life in this
2 or 4 years of college and to have it all figured out by the time I graduated. But, that's not how the real world works. And there are times where you get into a field after college and you find that, actually I have some talents or skills in a different area and I'd like to try that out. And so we're in a day and age where you can do that. It's not as pressured of you pick one career and you stay in that for, the rest of your life. If you love it, then that's great. Stay with it, and that's wonderful. We want people where they're passionate, where they are alive, and I think that's the most important thing, is finding that place, but also taking a deep breath and realizing that you don't have to have it all figured out by the time you graduate, and to enjoy the experiences and the things that you're learning while you're in college, and grow from your teachers, grow from the staff there, learn from the other students, but don't expect that once you graduate you're going to have everything fully figured out, and it's okay. It really is okay. You'll be good, and just trust yourself to make those decisions as you continue to grow on your next step.
Probably have more fun.
We hear that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be open to life's twists and turns. I never thought I would be a college professor. That was never on my radar. But be open to where life will take you, and get a PhD. That would be my other hopes.
Oh, I like that answer.
I stopped at a master's, and I really wish I wouldn't have.
Well, what I decided I was gonna say about this particular topic is, like hundreds or maybe even thousands of other TCC students, I am a first-generation college student. And so I kind of always tell the story that I was one of those students that glided through high school. I made good grades. I didn't really have to study. I really didn't have to think about it too much, to be honest. And when I got to college that first semester, it was sort of a rude awakening that, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to exert a lot of effort to get where I want to go. And so I did. I taught myself how to study, and got a lot of feedback from different faculty members along the way of how best to do that. And I'm very proud to say I graduated with a 3.9 and went on straight into a graduate program and into my career path.
It would be, on a general sense, listen more. That seems to be the number one thing that keeps coming back to me that I think is important in life, is listening to other people and taking the time to not think about what you want to say next and just listen. And I got that from music, because to make music effectively with other people, you have to listen to them and not listen to yourself, which is really hard. But it's a skill that transfers over into having discussions and working through problems together with people.
Look what you have ahead of you. It's a blank canvas. And these next couple of years, really enjoy. I when I went back for my doctorate, I loved being in school. Mm-hmm. And I realized I had that same opportunity, beforehand.
To love being in school.
To love being in school,
yeah.
and the moment. And so I would tell myself to really absorb that, but to stay the course, to stay in school, and to really follow the dreams. And the beauty of you being 18 years old is you don't have that life experience, so you're apt to try things that this old guy might not try now. Mm-hmm. Try them. Mm. Put it out there, and pursue what you want, but enjoy it.
I don't think it's necessarily something that I would tell my 18-year-old self. I think it's more knowing. Something I want my 18-year-old self to know, and that is really knowing the sacrifices that my parents went through in order to get to where I am today.
Yeah.
It took me several years, almost a decade, to really understand those sacrifices, and it makes me appreciate where I am today with my life that much more. And it gives me an understanding that I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate. Mm-hmm. So I think it's that rather than telling myself something. So I'm glad that question was brought up.
Yeah.
2 things. 1, if you follow your heart, you're not going to go wrong. And 2, at that point, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher when I was a sophomore in high school. And that's a whole different story. But since I knew I wanted to be a teacher, I would just tell myself, listen, after 19 years of doing this, you're going to have so much fun. You're going to love your job. And so just do the things that it takes to make yourself the most prepared that you can be to be the best teacher for your students, because you're going to love them and you're going to want to do your best for them. And make sure that you become the lifelong learner that you want your students to be. That's what I would say.
Well, I can relate to this because I started at Tulsa Junior College when I was 17 years old, straight out of high school.
Yay.
I was accepted into the nursing program, and I was young and immature. What I would probably recommend would be to communicate with your faculty. You know, I was shy, I was young, I thought, ooh, there are faculty over there, you know, I don't really want to talk to them. And now that I'm faculty, I would really encourage students, whether they're young or old, all of them, to communicate with their faculty. Whether it's to call them, set up an appointment to meet with them in their office, just so you can let them know what's maybe going on in your life, because you need to get that bond going, I think.
Yeah. Lisa, what about you?
Well, I was going to say, don't be afraid to talk to your faculty, and also go to class.
Yeah.
I think I would start with saying I wish I had known sooner how crucial it is and how important it is to get to know your professors in college. I think I didn't realize that until later on, that the relationship building aspect of that, how big of an impact that can have with your future. So there's the practical aspects of that as far as having someone to help you, possibly be an academic reference or a reference when you're trying to gain employment. But just the knowledge that they have, they're just such an untapped resource that sometimes we don't take advantage of. And your professors, you can have really great relationships, and they can sometimes become your biggest ally, your biggest advocate, and even a great friend. So I wish I had known that. On the less practical side, I would just say love what you do or do what you love. And I think that's something I would tell myself as well.
A tough question.
It's
and
always
a fun question.
it's always the hardest question of the interview.
Well, I don't know. I had a great career. I went to a very good high school in Bethesda, Maryland. Matter of fact, the same school David Bourne and I both went there at the same time, where our fathers were both in government. His father was a congressman, and mine worked for Eisenhower. So I grew up. I'm from a one-room schoolhouse in Oklahoma, but somehow I went from a facility that had 38 kids to one junior high that had 1,000. And so it was a sticker shock. But you transition. People transition. They can transition into anything. You go back in time and you read novels about what, the 1800s and how 14-year-olds were doing men's work. I mean, people can transition to anything. I transitioned. I was an athlete. I was on the golf team. I went to a school to play golf, but I got a very, very good education at OU. I was on the Dean's Honor Roll and graduated and went on to do something else with my life. But, I would leave your audience, especially the students, you can do anything. You get a good education, and if you work hard enough, you can do anything. And you can transition your life into something new, just like I'm doing. I don't need to run for the legislature. I've retired 3 times, and I don't need to do this. I don't need the money, but it's something I want to do, and I'm willing to work for it to make our state better. All of our people can do that too. If you get a good education and work at it, you can become anything you want to be.
I would tell my 18-year-old self that it's just the beginning. To be a lifelong learner, that's the real key. You want to be a lifelong learner, so learn everything you can from everybody you can.
Mary, how about you?
I love that question because I was really fortunate. I would tell my 18-year-old self, good choice. You chose a small liberal arts college where you really got a great academic experience with a tremendous amount of support, which has always kind of informed what I want to do as a college professor. But I would say, along the lines of what Lissa says, don't be afraid to take those classes that are outside your comfort zone.
Embrace humility early on. It's something that life beats into you one way or the other, so you might as well.
That is good advice. We always get really good advice on that.
We do.
I've been an advisor, a student organization advisor for 19 years in various organizations, the last 10 with Phi Theta Kappa. And I always encourage students to, take advantage fully of what opportunities are available at the college. And I realized after saying this a few times that as a young person, I didn't do that myself. I was too busy working and grinding away with studying to get involved in student organizations and student life, and I wish I had gone and gotten involved. So that's the advice I would give myself, my 18-year-old self, would be to get involved in campus life.
So I have one sentence that I would tell myself, and I've thought about this a lot. As I've moved into higher education as a career choice, I always think back to my experience, and I think it really it helps me develop programming that would have helped me be successful, because it's a miracle that I graduated with my undergraduate degree. I would tell myself, Molly, no one thinks you're stupid. Just ask the questions. Just get the answers that you need. I was a first-generation college student. I thought that everyone else had it figured out except for me, and I was not going to ask a question about it because then everybody would know that I was a fraud and that I wasn't supposed to be there.
Imposter.
Yes,
yeah,
it's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so, I would just tell myself that, you were accepted to college. Everybody thinks you're supposed to be here. Just answer the questions you need to be successful, or get the answers to the questions to be successful.
Great advice.
That's great advice.
A couple of things. I would have said, calm down and relax. It's all going to be fine. It's a journey. But I think I would have said, you're much brighter and sharper than you feel right now. You're much capable of much more than you feel right now when you're 18.
Wow. Good advice.
Well, my goal one day is to be Dean of Students. So that's what I've always been pushing toward. And I've always wanted to be in that area. So if I were speaking to an 18-year-old Kedron Dotson, I would say certainly as you go through your life in your 20s, stop, take a breath, and soak in everything that will prepare you for your job that you want one day. Because oftentimes, as we all do, you zoom through your 20s and you zoom through your 30s.
And your 40s. And
so I would say stop and soak it in, because when that opportunity presents itself, you want to make sure you have all of what you need to be ready for that.
That's a good question. There's a lot of things I would tell myself when I was 18. I think when I was 18, the thing I would tell myself as I went into college is that the joy of the whole thing, the joy of life is in the journey, is the quote. But I would say that the joy of the whole thing is in the process. The greatest regret I have from college is that I graduated early.
Interesting.
I didn't necessarily stop and smell the roses the entire way through and realize everything I was learning and how valuable that might be.
Did you go straight to law school after you graduated?
I did. I graduated early and went straight to law school as a 21-year-old. Probably would have done that a little bit differently in the past. That's not to say you shouldn't finish on time, but it is to say enjoy that learning process and make the most of it, because it's easy in higher ed to get caught up in sort of an abstract idea of achievement, but really those learning processes are what will pay off for you in the future.
I would say the main thing is pursue what your passion is. Don't let anyone try to steer you in a direction. Do what you want to do. Don't worry about the amount of money that you're going to make or if it makes your family happy. If I was to do that, I would be a physician right now, and I would not be happy.
Wow.
So
that's a great reminder to us all.
And I always think that good manners and respect for others, that's going to get you a long, long way in life. So
that's true.
I imagine everyone says I've given this a lot of thought, but
They all say that.
We all say that.
Question.
It is a very thoughtful question, and it's kind of a hard question.
It is hard.
To really bring it down without being here all day.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, I think I would tell myself to be patient with myself.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people hear me talk about being on the journey, and I wish I'd put myself on the journey to understand that every step you take it's really just a point in time, and you don't have to accomplish everything you want in today. We all have time.
What are you talking about?
We need to. Well, let's talk later. I have a leather couch, and we can talk about this more.
I gotcha.
But I just thinking about. This is a progression. Everything we do is a progression, and we're where we need to be when we need to be there. Learning the lesson and really being patient with where you are and what you're doing today. And also being very intentional with relationships. So putting the time that's required into relationships, that's really hard.
Good advice.
It's hard today to remember that, even though you're always telling yourself to be intentional. Your kids are only this age when they're this age, and your parents are this age when they're, so being really intentional with your friendships and with your loved ones, I think would be first and foremost patience and being intentional.
It's a really hard question. I am one of those rare people who loved both my college experience and that my transitions into graduate school went very well. I didn't have any money. I would have probably said to think about getting into the service of higher education or education earlier. I actually look back on it and go, my industry experience really provided a foundation for me. I think if I was totally honest with myself, the skill sets that I happened to apply in industry could have been applied to higher education earlier. I think I would tell that 18-year-old to be a little more meta-analytic about how I thought about higher education, because what I realized when I came back in 2002, after going through from 87 to 96 when I got my doctorate, straight through 9 years, is that when I came back in 2002, I'd never thought about the process of education much at all. I just did it. And when you're 18, you're 19, that's one thing. I don't know if my 18-year-old self would have listened to me. But I think what I was realizing as I went through that is there's much I didn't like about that process of education. I was really lucky. I went to Stanford undergrad, which is one of the top schools in the country. I don't think the pedagogy I got there was any different than I would have gotten had I gone to Foothill College, which is right next to Stanford where I worked. You had researchers who were better. The student population had more, quote unquote, was more prepared. I actually think I could make the argument that pedagogy was worse. And I didn't go to class much. I wouldn't tell myself to go to class because I didn't need to go to class, partially because the pedagogy was so bad, right? What I would say, though, is to think about that more then and what it meant for what I could potentially help higher education do. That's when I came back in 2002 and realized that the petri dish for all of this, the ultimate lever for change, is in the community college system. It's where most of the students in the country start. It's a really powerful set of moral and ethical outcomes that we're working towards. And I think we already have paved the way for it, and I think it's time to take that next step. I'm really excited about it. So.
Simple. I would tell myself to be disciplined and get organized, because I did not do that right away, and I struggled because it's so much going on. You juggle so much as a beginning student that it took me time to find that organization, develop that organization. And so now that I teach strategies all the time, I tell them all the time that my most successful students are not always the smartest, but they are almost always the most organized. It's the organized student that does really well. So, that's what I would tell myself.
That's good advice.
I
I would study political science to become, to run for a Senate seat and represent our communities, our minority communities especially.
The advice I would give, as I look back, and I've reached my sunset years here now, the things I regret the most are the things I didn't do.
Right.
The opportunities I didn't take, the service I didn't render. So take time to do some things that really are important to you. Don't be afraid to do things. Because I didn't make a lot of mistakes. I made my share of mistakes, but again, it's mostly missed opportunities. And college, to me, was a whole world of opportunities.
Main advice that I would give would be, don't be afraid to take risks. Go outside your comfort zone. Dwell outside your comfort zone. Meet with people and interact with people that you had never thought you would. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Learn about things. Ask questions that you might not have thought that you could ask. This is the place to do it. It's a place of exploration and discovery of yourself, and you're given this time to do that. So get out there and take risks. And that's what I love about college, and that's why I never wanted to leave.
Panic is more dangerous than enemy guns. Fear of failure is a joke. You can do it. Don't wait. Don't think about anything that your life's been in the past. That was then. This is now. Step forward. Make that call. Don't wait. You can do anything that you can do. The thing that I have learned is that all things are possible for those that believe. Tulsa Community College Respiratory Care Department believes in you.